All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today during your lunchtime for an awesome webinar that we have. And so for those that do not know me, my name is Martha Serrano. I am the coordinator for the Money Management Center here on campus. So again, we host different webinars. We have in-person workshops, everything you could think about financial literacy. We are there to support you. Again, we do not provide the financial advice, but we do have that information, those resources. And today we are very excited to have our panelist for the semester. She's presented in the past, but at least for this fall semester, it's Megan Kolofer from Golden One Credit Union. So she has a great presentation on budgeting that everybody could really benefit from. So I will make sure to hand it over to Megan, but if anybody does have any questions, please make sure to use the chat box. If we have any comments, go ahead and put it in the chat box. We'll make sure to keep an eye out for that. But Megan, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share screen here. Can we see it, Martha?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So my name is Megan Kolofer, and I am Golden One Credit Union's Community and Financial Education Specialist. Today, we're going to be talking about building a better budget. But before we get started, I do have to provide just a little bit of background on Golden One Credit Union. Golden One is a not-for-profit credit union and a member-owned financial institution. Additionally, our financial education department promotes and provides complimentary and unbiased financial literacy tools and resources to the various communities that we serve. As the verbiage on my screen reads, views and opinions expressed by the speakers, aka me, at this workshop might not necessarily represent those of Golden One Credit Union, especially if I start sharing some personal stories, right? We're going to go ahead and get this webcast started. Once again, please take advantage of that chat box feature. If you do have questions, please post them in the chat box. And hopefully between Martha and myself, we can get all of those questions answered. So once again, welcome to Building a Better Budget. Now, when we hear this word budget, what do we think of? Type it in the chat. What do you think of when you hear this word budget? I know for me, when I think of the word budget, and what I hear a lot from people attending workshops like this one, is they think of denial, restriction, something that's not fun. But a good budget can help us use our money efficiently and reach goals and achieve financial independence without having to sacrifice a lot of life's pleasures. And budgets, well, they vary from individual to individual, but one rule is pretty consistent when it comes to budgeting, and that's that your expenses should never exceed your income. So when we get started with budgeting, it can be difficult, right? It's easy to procrastinate, especially when there's this negative association with budgeting. So instead, I really want us to focus on goal achievement, right? A lot of people believe they can't pay bills while saving for goals, but often you can do both if we prioritize some of our expenses. To start, we got to look back at some of our past financial decisions, because this can help us avoid repeating mistakes. It's also important to set reasonable goals to avoid feeling discouraged, right? We don't want to set goals that are so grandiose that it's impossible to accomplish them in the timeline that we have set for ourselves. And of course, making lifestyle changes, breaking bad habits and replacing them with good ones, it's hard, but it is a winnable challenge. And the advantages of budgeting are going to far outweigh the disadvantages. When we go to construct our budgets, there's a lot of ways that we can do this, but I really need us to focus on this idea of creating a budget that is more of a spending and savings plan. And you can do this, through lots of different platforms. Maybe you use a paper worksheet or a computer program or computer spreadsheet, or just, like I said, pen on paper, right? Now, if you are using a website to construct and track your budgeting, we do highly recommend that you do so via a secured platform. So look in that your URL bar at the top of your screen, make sure, it has HTTPS in the URL bar. The S stands for security, and it usually means that there's some kind of security certificate that's tied to that website. You'll also want to look for little padlock symbols at the top of the site, because those also indicate that the site is secured. Maybe there's a password or something that you can use as well to help secure that information, because we don't want that information to get in the wrong hands. We don't want, fraud or identity theft to happen. Okay. Now, I see for some of you, there was sorry to interrupt and stop our train of thought here, but there was a recent upgrade that was made to Zoom. So if you are having difficulty with the chat box feature in Zoom, try using the Q&A function. That way we can make sure we get all of your questions addressed as we go as well. Okay.
Thank you for that, Megan. I think I was able to resolve that issue. So hopefully everybody can use the chat box now. Thanks.
Great. So once again, when we're constructing our budget, we got to think of it as a spending and savings plan. And so as part of that plan, I would like for us all to keep this goal achievement in mind and really work on paying ourselves first, right? We got to avoid this negative connotation with the word budget. And we can really do this if we shift our focus to the most important person in your budget, and that's you. We've got to make ourselves a priority. We're not here to live, work, and pay bills. If we pay ourselves first, and then we use what's left to construct our budget, it's going to help us live within our means and be a little bit more in tune with our well-being, right? Because we're working towards a goal, something that matters with us. Now, I don't want us to go crazy here. Remember, you can have anything, but you can't have everything. We got to make a plan, and we got to stick to a budget to get to our goals. Now, goals themselves, they're an essential part of every budget, and they are the reward that's going to keep us moving on this spending plan. So when we construct goals, we should make them what we call SMART goals. And SMART is an acronym, okay? S stands for specific. We got to nail down the total amount it's going to cost us to achieve our goals. Our goals should also be measurable. If you can't follow your progress or see the end in sight, you're likely to get sidetracked or even forget about that goal altogether. The goal should also be attainable. Goals that are too large can just be extremely discouraging. So make sure that the steps, the things that you put into place to reach that goal are actual things that you can do, right? So with that goal should also be relevant and realistic. A goal that is going to cause financial insecurity in other key areas is not going to be sustainable here. Sure, I would love to be a millionaire. Would have loved to have hit that jackpot in the lotto recently, right? Am I going to be a millionaire by the end of the month? Yeah, probably not, right? I can't think of any steps to get me there that isn't going to cause me to be not sustainable in other areas, right? So make sure that your goals are realistic and they are something that is actually attainable. And finally, that goal should be time bound. You've got to set an end date for your goal before you can know what it is that you need to save each month, right? So these goals, once again, they've got to be specific measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound. Does anyone in here have a goal that they might be working towards? Anyone have a SMART goal that they would like to share with the group? Think of those goals. I know a common SMART goal for students is, to save up for a new computer, save for the next semester, whatever that might be, right? So saving money for a car or paying tuition, yeah, absolutely. Put $500 in your emergency fund before the end of this year. Well, that one might be tough, right? I love that that goal is time stamped, right? It's time stamped. But think about that. That's $250 this month and $250 next month. Is that doable, right? And this is what I mean when we're establishing our goals that are attainable and realistic. Sometimes these goals, they could just be too large, too massive. So don't set yourself up for failure. T stands for time bound, by the way, coming up in the chat there, right? So make sure that the goals that we're establishing are something that you can track, something that you can follow, and something that you can celebrate once you've achieved it, right? It's kind of like New Year's resolutions, right? Sometimes we set up these New Year's resolutions and they're just astronomical. And 365 days can seem like a lot of time, but for some goals, it's not. Like it's just not doable, right? Same with my example about becoming a millionaire by the end of the month. It's not attainable. It's not realistic. So let me give you all an example because I'm an example person, and this tends to be a pretty common example for college students, and that's to save for tuition or save for some kind of college cost. So let's look at this SMART goal together. I want to save $3,000 for college in the next year. This goal in and of itself is specific, right? We want to save $3,000. The goal is time bound. We want to do this in a year. This goal is measurable. If we take 3,000 and we divide it by 12, that's $250 a month. And for me, this goal is attainable. I think I can find some areas to cut back or increase my income to reach this particular goal. And this goal is relevant and it's realistic and it has importance and it has some weight for me, which is going to help drive me towards wanting to pursue and actively achieve this particular goal. Now, it's also recommended that we save for several different goals at the same time. And one of the best ways to begin mapping out this plan for achievement is to separate your goals into short, mid, and long-term timeframes. Right? So we've talked about SMART goals. It's obvious we all probably have and should have more than one goal. So separating these goals into our spending and savings plan budget into these short, mid, and long-term timeframes is going to help us figure out exactly how much of our savings we should be allocating to each of these goals, as well as how much we can actually allocate to these goals. Now, the short-term goals, these are goals that are usually achieved in 12 months or less, and they're likely to be smaller amounts than some of those mid or long-term goals. Right? Maybe it's to create that emergency savings, right? Funds set aside in the case that you need them at some point in the next year. And of course, emergency savings accounts are a really good idea because they're going to carry you through any times where you experience, a reduction in income or have some unexpected expense that tries to derail the other SMART goals that you might have. And if you don't currently have an emergency savings, you might want to make this one a top priority as well. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. But some other common short-term goals could be like planning for purchases, maybe a new computer, back to school supplies, or clothing in addition to, holidays and vacations that you might want to take throughout the year. Our midterm goals, these goals are goals that are 1 to 5 years in terms of time. But be careful with these goals. With midterm goals, it can be so easy to think that that achievement date of that midterm goal is so far away that I'll just skip 1 month of savings and make it up later. And this sort of attitude can be really detrimental to the accomplishment of your goals. And you should really try to avoid that whenever possible, because each month that you skip, it's pushing the achievement date of your goal out that much farther. But if you stick with your plan and you do your best to stay on track with your savings, you can thank yourself in the future. And of course, long-term goals along that same note, right? They take a lot of time, and compound interest is very real, right? The longer you have something in there, the more chance it has to earn some kind of interest rate or rate of return, and can help it grow exponentially. So the longer you have funds in there, the more it can grow. So we need to really save for those long-term goals now, right? Start now while you're young, because it can really grow. Even though that date is probably for, retirement, kids' college tuition, it might be 30, 40 years down the road for you. But it is something that takes a really long time and takes a lot of dedication to get there. So having long-term goals in place is recommended. Now, once you've accomplished higher priority goals, rather than directing whatever money you were setting aside for that goal back into your spending plan, you should apply those funds that you were spending or saving each month for that goal. Just redirect them to other goals. Don't put them back into your everyday spending. Now, once again, I'm an example person. So I have an example for you, but remember, this is just an example. Realize that not everyone's budgets are going to be the same here, nor will your budget be the same year after year. You might have to reanalyze and relook at your SMART goals every year, depending on where your income is now versus where it may be in the future. So if we look at this goal chart, you can see I've got one of each here. I've got a short-term goal, a midterm goal, and a long-term goal. My short-term goal, I need to replenish my savings account. I need about $1,800. To do that within a year, I'm looking at a payment of $150. My midterm goals, got that COVID debt, that online shopping debt. I've got about $5,000 I need to pay off. I want to do it in 3 years. Monthly payment to that would be $200 to make that happen. And then finally, my long-term goal, help fund retirement in the next 30 years. I want $1 million. That's $350 a month. So in this example, and this is just tackling one SMART goal in each category, I need to save a total of $700 a month to achieve these SMART goals. Now, I understand for some of you, this might not be doable. So we might need to forego some SMART goals, maybe adjust the total amount needed or the time period in which we're using to save for these goals, right? That emergency savings account, it's important, but if I can't make that type of payment, it's okay to make it a midterm goal, right? As long as you're working towards it and you're allocating funds towards it, you will eventually get there. And we've all heard that saying, a penny earned or a penny saved is a penny earned, right? So every little bit can help here. I mean, think about it. The average cup of coffee in the US is $3.28. Now, this is a statistic I recently read, but I start thinking about it and I go, well, the cup of coffee I get at Starbucks or Dutch Brothers is like $5 a cup without the whipped cream, right? And I start thinking about that and how often I buy that cup of coffee. Say I buy that cup of coffee every day, right? That adds up to $1,800 a year. How far could that take me in establishing and achieving some of these SMART goals, right? So really be mindful about where your money is going when you start to create these budgets. and be mindful of these goals and the importance of paying yourself first, because it'll really help you weigh out some of these needs versus want-based purchases. Now, we've already talked about, or I've mentioned briefly, the importance of establishing an emergency savings account. Having money in a liquid, easily accessible, tax and penalty-free account helps people avoid turning to expensive loans or friends and family during some kind of financial emergency. As a general rule of thumb, single people should have the equivalent of 3 months worth of essential expenses set aside. And if you're providing for someone else, it's recommended that you have 6 months worth of essential expenses. Now, if this pandemic has taught us anything, it's that even these timeframes might not be enough, right? So save, save, save. Make sure that you are keeping it in a liquid account, right? An account where you can make a withdrawal. Keeping an emergency savings account or emergency cash, if you will, in your wallet isn't always the best place to have it, right? Because if we are walking through the free speech area and we drop a $20 bill, I would find it hard to believe that you would go back an hour later and still see that $20 bill there, right? So put your funds where they are secured. Keep them in an account where they can sit, hopefully earn some interest, and then you can really marvel at some of the growth that those savings accounts are doing. Now, budgeting itself, it starts with income because it determines exactly what you can afford to spend and what you can afford to save each month. And remember, your expenses should always fit within your earnings. So when you're looking at your income and you're establishing this budget, don't overestimate. You need to use really conservative figures here. So if you get overtime with your employer, only include that overtime if you're 100% certain that it's going to continue. And remember, that opportunity, it might not be available or even desirable in the future. And then bonuses, only include those if they're guaranteed, right? Yeah, you might get them and it feels like you receive those bonuses every month, right? But what happens if that month passes and you don't get a bonus? Is it going to derail everything that you've done? Do you have an emergency savings plan in place to cover it? Right? And is it something that's going to continue? And then if you're self-employed, this income can be kind of challenging to estimate, and it's always better to err on the safe side. And if your income fluctuates because of like commissions or seasonable variables, use last year's income as a base to kind of help you, and then conservatively estimate this year's income with past information and any future predictions that you might have. And then another one I want to mention here, and it is on the screen, but make sure your tax withholdings are correct. You should neither owe money or receive a substantial tax refund. The goal here is to balance out and not owe or get much money back. Remember, a tax refund, it's your own money. It's not a gift from the government. This refund money that you receive at tax season could have been going towards necessary expenses or into some kind of interest-bearing savings or investment account. And of course, if you're under withholding, then this can lead to an outstanding tax bill. And of course, there could be interest and possibly penalty fees associated with what is owed as well. So make sure that those tax withholdings are correct. Once we have the income figured out, we got to figure out where the money is going, right? So once you've got that savings goal, you have the income figured out, let's start tracking all of your expenses. So track those expenses because it's going to help provide an understanding of where that money is going every month. So if you're already spending, which most of us are, spend as normal, maybe make some adjustments based on discoveries that you make, and make sure you're tracking everything. Make copies and record every purchase, right? You use a small notebook or a piece of paper, record them somewhere, note the date, the item, the cost, and add up those purchases each day, right? And do this for a couple of weeks so you can really see where your money is going. Don't forget to, keep your receipts from purchases and tally them up at the end of each day. And of course, credit cards and debit cards, this is kind of easy to track because we usually have an electronic record of these transactions. But be aware of that ATM use and how long cash lasts before you have to return to that ATM and pull out more, right? Gather all that information, really take a look at that budget and see where your funds are going. My husband and I recently did this, and my husband is not a tracker like myself, right? Probably because of the industries that we're in and how we work. But me, I'm the budgeter. I'm the one that balances that checkbook, so to speak, and really looks at where that money is going. And so we did this for a couple of months, and we discovered some pretty nasty habits. Obviously, mine. It's the coffee, right? It's going to that Starbucks or Dutch Brothers to get coffee and realizing how much money I was really allocating to that every month. So I made some adjustments and brewed my coffee at home and was really able to save a lot of money. For my hubby, it was running to the Quickie Mart, right? Like it was on his way home. He has to fill up with gas almost every other day. And he would always run into the Quickie Mart and pick up snacks or an energy drink or whatever it may be. But those purchases were really adding up. And when we took a look at all of those purchases from just picking up snacks in the checkout line, it was averaging up to a couple $100 a month. And if you take that and you multiply it by 12, that's a lot of money that could be going elsewhere throughout the year. So when you start looking and evaluating your spending, go through it line by line. If you have certain bills, say, for your phone bill, for example, what's it going to hurt to look up and see if there's other discounts or a cheaper plan available? Unfortunately, I had to learn that the hard way. My family has AT&T, and we were on some AT&T plan and I hadn't reevaluated it. I didn't look at it. And so it turns out that we had a dinosaur of a plan. So when we went in to finally, upgrade our cell phones, we found out that we were paying an unnecessary $60 more a month on a phone plan that was completely outdated. So take a look at those line items, look at each purchase and see if there's any way that you might be able to scale that back, and it will help you save. Now, a few suggested guidelines in terms of budgeting. Now, this once again is just a suggested guideline for a budget. I realize that everyone's priorities are different, but this can act as a really good starting point. Your housing should be roughly 35% of your income. Savings should be at least 10%. Remember, you're a priority here. We have to have some kind of savings taking place. We should be working towards some kind of SMART goal. Your transportation should be about 15%. Your outstanding consumer debt payments, if you have any debt payments, that should be no more than 15%. And all the rest, that includes food, clothing, entertainment, childcare, medical expenses, vacations, all of it, 25%. Okay. Remember, this is just a suggested guideline, but it is a very good place to start. When you are reevaluating your budgets and you start noticing some of your spending habits, both the good and the bad, I want you to be mindful that we all make these powerful spending choices every day. to help make some of these best decisions possible and really keep on this newly developed budget, it's a good idea to assess each purchase. So ask yourself, do I need it? Remember, a want is a desire. It's something that's possible to live without. A need is an essential, which means living without it would cause extreme hardship. Every expense should be examined and considered, particularly if bill paying is a struggle. And ask yourself, do I need it now? Is the item needed immediately, or can it be delayed? If it has to go on something like a credit card, and then that ultimate price is high because of added interest, is it really worth the cost? And what would happen if you didn't have it? Asking this question can make the difference between, bringing home a shopping bag full of impulse items that, might have used up that monthly food budget, and saving for things that are really wanted or needed. If after you subtract all of your proposed monthly expenses from your monthly income, and you find that those expenses are exceeding your income, take some action here to get ahead. Start with income. Consider some ways it can be increased, right? And know that these should be temporary fixes, right? We don't want to do these things forever, but they are a good way to help get you back on track. And maybe that means you have to work longer hours for overtime pay or obtain part-time work. Or, it's the end of the year. Maybe it's time to request a raise or find a better paying job. You might even consider selling some assets, right? Because of the things that you sell, that money, those proceeds can be like an instant emergency savings account for you, right? So really look at those options. And if decreasing spending is going to enable goal achievement, make some reasonable choices. Determine what can be reduced, substituted out, like my coffee buying, right? Or postponed for a later date, or unfortunately eliminated altogether. And make sure you're saving for those goals. Enrolling in things like an automatic deposit savings program can be helpful here. You can predetermine an amount to be regularly transferred from your checking account into a savings account. You can even set this up off of your direct deposit. That way you never see it leaving your checking account, and it just does it for you automatically, right? Out of sight, out of mind, but it's still doing what it needs to do. And if retirement saving is a goal, I really urge you to check with whoever your employer may be and ask that human resources department if they have some kind of retirement programming or fund, like something called a 401k or some kind of IRA contribution or something of that nature to help you save towards that retirement goal. Now, there's a lot of ways to help reduce budgetary waste here. And I know that I've given you quite a few ways to review and think about it, but be mindful of your community resources as well. I mean, we do have a student cupboard on campus to help with food. There's a lot of other great, fantastic resources available to you as a Fresno State student. So look for and use those resources to help you keep your budget in line or get back on budget or just put food on the table if that's what you need. Okay, so be mindful of that. Now, I get asked this particular question all the time, and it's, should you save if you have debt, right? Accelerating debt repayment, it's an important goal, but it's still a really good idea to set aside money for an emergency savings fund and for retirement, right? Because we already know that goal takes a really long time. So with an emergency fund, There's no need to rely on credit if something unexpectedly happens. And of course, saving for retirement takes dedication and time. It can't be done at the last minute. And contributing to a retirement fund also reduces your taxable income and nets you some additional cash if your employer matches that contribution. But if you're consistently saving each month, you're going to start making savings a habit. And once you've created a savings habit, you're going to start experiencing this increased confidence with regards to savings, which is only going to encourage you to continue saving, right? Think about it. If you forego that cup of coffee in my case, right? And I do that for a whole year, I would have met my emergency account savings goal of saving $1,800. I would have succeeded with that. And now that I reached that goal, I now have the funds that I would have been applying to that goal to apply to a new goal, right? Maybe that's my girls' trip to Napa or whatever it might be for you, right? Just don't put that money once you achieved your goal. Don't put that money that you were savings back into your spending plan, right? Keep it in your saving plan and find a new goal to save for, right? Keep using those funds. That way you're constantly and always paying yourself first. Now, I don't want to sound like a broken record here, but start saving now. I mean, we usually spend to our capacity, whatever our income is. So start saving now, pay yourself first, set up those automatic transfers into a savings account. And that way you don't have to remember to do it on your own. A lot of employers will allow you to select different accounts in which to deposit paychecks. So you could set up the fund automatically to go to your savings account as you get paid. If your employer doesn't offer that, by all means, visit your financial institution. A lot of times they have simple forms to complete to be able to divvy out your savings accounts. Now, if you're an organizational, type A personality like I am, it's okay to have multiple savings accounts, right? Maybe you have a savings account just for your short-term goals, one for your midterm goals, and one for your long-term goals. Or maybe you're like me and you have 8 savings accounts, right? You've got one for your vacation fund, one for your next car, one for back to school supplies and so forth, right? And that's okay too. And you can automate these things to go into those individual buckets every time that you get paid. And of course, saving when repaying debts, this is going to allow you to work on 2 financial goals simultaneously, right? You're going to be establishing that emergency savings, but you're also going to be focusing on paying debt and not increasing debt, which is why it's so important to save while also repaying debt if you are one of those individuals. Now, I want to encourage you to stay motivated when it comes to this savings and spending plan. Really visualize your success. Maybe you tape a photo of the goal somewhere obvious, like a computer or a refrigerator. Stay organized. Make sure you're paying those bills on time. Maybe set up an area in your home or your apartment for some kind of money management and have your budget on hand and refer to it often. Be realistic with that budget and with your goals. Recognize that your goals aren't going to be achieved overnight, and changing some of these entrenched habits is going to take some work. We also want to monitor our progress. Really enjoy that process of watching dollars grow and marvel at your savings account each month, because it's a real achievement to be able to achieve these SMART goals. Of course, we've also got to expect that there's going to be some setbacks. But if you know that those bumps in the road are eventually going to occur, you'll be able to prepare for them and you won't be tempted to abandon some of your other SMART goals. So have that emergency savings account in place and know that it is there for emergencies. I mean, imagine, your car's making some funny noise and you take it to the mechanic and they say, it's going to cost $1,200 to fix it. If you didn't have an emergency savings account, you might be a little panicked You might be worried, right? You become stressed. How do I obtain this? And a lot of times we got to put that on a charge card, right? Or we got to take out some expensive loan or borrow money from friends and family to pay for it. Now imagine you had an emergency savings account and you took that car into the mechanic and they said, it's $1,200 to fix it. And you had the funds. You had the funds in an emergency savings account to pay for it. Right? Yeah, it's the pits that you got to pay that kind of money to fix it. That part's not fun. But at least that financial stress, that burden isn't there because you have a plan in place. You've got a plan in place for these setbacks. And now you're not derailing your other goals because this speed bump happened. Right? So expect those setbacks, plan for those setbacks, and create that emergency savings account. Of course, we also need to reward ourselves along the way. Like hard work deserves recognition from the most important person, and that's you. Just make sure you're not busting your budget when you do reward yourself. So decide now, what specific tasks need to be done today, in the next 3 months, and this year. Maybe you mark your calendar with some proposed milestones. A well-developed budget is going to be a springboard to financial independence. It's going to help you, clarify some objectives, organize personal finances, refine your spending, and attain these goals that, you only previously dreamed of. Success isn't going to happen overnight, but if you start now, you'll be that much closer to it tomorrow. Now, I know I've gone over a lot of information regarding budgeting, and I want to allocate some time for us to see if anyone has any questions for me, big or small, relating to this presentation or anything Golden One related. I am here for questions. Please post them up in the chat. As those questions are coming into the chat, if there is any, I do want to point you in the direction of some more financial wellness resources. Golden1.com does have a great financial wellness website. We have online videos, little snippets that you're welcome to view. We also cast webinars similar to this one a couple times a week, with the exception of next week. We have quite a few next week because we're having a campaign with Golden One. We also have podcasts available. The podcasts are on an array of topics. A lot of them are student-centered. So I encourage you to visit our podcast station and take a look and listen to those webcasts. We also have a learning lab that has interactive modules in it, kind of like a Google Classroom, but you kind of walk through it at your own pace. Right? And there's no registration required for any of these resources. And you don't have to be a member of Golden One to use any of these resources. They're just free resources for you to utilize. Once again, I'm going to stick around for any questions, but please, by all means, visit this website, expand your financial literacy, and I look forward to speaking to you all again soon. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much, Megan, for this information. I know somebody did post in the chat box earlier if they would be able to get the PowerPoint slide. So I did let him know, and just everybody, that we do post the recording on our YouTube channel. It's in the chat box as well. Just allow for at least tomorrow for that webinar to post. And you could also see other webinars that we posted in the past. I typed in our Money Management Center's website as well. So there's a lot of good information there. We have our calendar of events, and we have some other important resources. So like Megan said, if you guys have any questions, if not, that really concludes the presentation for today.